Satan probably, I mean, maybe he's got an IQ of 500 million, I don't know. He's very smart, but he's also very stupid because he's a self-deluded egomaniac. But what does Satan think? I am going to find out as soon as that baby is born, I am going to kill him. And I've won my battle with God because God is prophesying that that baby is going to do me in, okay? Well, goes on a little bit and we find out Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Oh, this is going to be a Jew. Oh, it's going to be the seed of David, and so forth. You can go through the Bible and see Athaliah, the queen, the mother of the king who just died. She has all the seed royal killed. Everyone that would be that could be a successor to David's throne, except one was hidden. Remember that? You remember Haman, who was going to have all the Jews wiped out? What about Herod? He's going to wipe the Satan. It makes sense. The only way you can explain anti-Semitism is Satan must kill these people.
Very good evening to all of you. Once again, I'm ever so thankful to have you all join us. We left off in our last study with the reign of Jehu. It's the summation of Jehu. King Jehu over here. We now pick up in the southern kingdom to do with these next two chapters. We're going to be talking about the reign of Athaliah, whom Dave Hunt just spoke about, and Joash. So who is this Athaliah? She is very evil. Some, like Robert C. Knapp, they believe that this is the most evil person that's ever lived, even above her mother Jezebel, Hitler, all of these. That is how evil this Athaliah truly is. Robert C. Knapp said of Athaliah, "No character in history, sacred or secular, stands out blacker or more hideous than this daughter-in-law of the godly Jehoshaphat. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal, all except one." Charles Ellicott said this, "Destroyed all the seed royal means all who might set up claims to the succession. Ahaziah's brothers had been slain by the Arabs, and his kinsmen by Jehu. Those whom Athaliah slew would be for the most part Ahaziah's own sons, though other relatives are not excluded by the term. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons, which were slain, and they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. Only one got out." And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. Now what was meant by she was hid in the house of the Lord, meaning that she was hid in Solomon's temple, not in the actual holy place or the Holy of Holies, but round about Solomon's temple right here. You would see it on all sides except for the entrance. There were these rooms for the priest to live in, and right here you would see them. And they would go all the way back, and on the other side, that is where, see the door right here? That is where they could have went in and out without ever stepping foot inside of the holy place. Notice how the entire reign of Athaliah, how it's just summarized like that. She had all the seed royal killed, and then nothing else. She reigned for 6 years. No more mention of her. Benson says this about that. "The writer dismisses the entire reign of Athaliah, whereof he scorns to speak. We gather incidentally from 2 Kings, compared with 2 Chronicles, that Athaliah used her power to establish the exclusive worship of Baal through the kingdom of Judah and to crush that of Jehovah, the worship of the true God. Matthew Henry said, Athaliah destroyed all she knew to be akin to the crown. Joash, one of the king's sons, was hid. Now was the promise made to David bound up in one life only, and yet it did not fail. There's only one seed of David. How important is this? Well, in case you don't know, Jesus could never have been born on this earth if this little boy hadn't escaped Athaliah's wrath. And I totally concur with Dave Hunt in stating that Satan's hand is obviously at work in this. He's trying to, through Athaliah, she's been worshiping Baal a long time, and through Baal, Satan, and he can work right through her like a little puppet. And he's obviously using her, planting these little thoughts in her mind. You need to kill these kids, kill all the descendants, kill all of David's seed. But Jesus comes through David's seed. So if she succeeds in killing David's seed, then Jesus doesn't come to the earth. But notice God's hand comes in right at the last minute and saves this one. Young Joash hid in Solomon's temple in the inner chambers. The priests, they keep watch over him, especially the high priest, Jehoiada. And now we pick up 7 years later. And the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds with the captains and the guard, and brought them to him into the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them, and took an oath of them in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. Now he's letting these soldiers in on it. And I believe that it's because favor had waned in regards to them following Athaliah. And he commanded them, saying, This is the thing that ye shall do. A third part of you that enter in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. And a third part shall be at the gate of Sur, and a third part at the gate behind the guard. So shall ye keep the watch of the house, that it be not broken down. And 2 parts of all that you go forth on the Sabbath, even they shall keep the watch of the house of the Lord about the king. And ye shall compass the king round about, every man with his weapons in his hand, and he that cometh within the ranges, let him be slain. And be ye with the king as he goeth out, and as he cometh in. He's talking about once that we're doing the ceremony, which they're just about ready to do, he says, all of you be ready. And the captains over the hundreds did according to all the things that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they took every man his men that were to come in on the Sabbath with them that should go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And to the captains over hundreds did the priest give King David's spears and shields that were in the temple of the Lord. Cambridge had some good comment on these David's weaponry within the house of the Lord. These wouldn't have been in the holy place. Once again, they'd have been where the priest resided around the temple. These weapons were those which David in his wars had taken from his enemies and stored probably in the chambers round the temple where the priest stayed, for the practice of so devoting the weapons of the conquered, in a way of showing this is because of you, God, that we have these weapons, like Goliath's sword and such. And the guards stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, round about the king, from the right corner of the temple to the left corner of the temple, along by the altar and the temple. And he brought forth the king's son. So here they go, they're about to crown him. And mind you, Athaliah she's not very far from the temple at this time. She even hears the noise that they make. So she's very much still in power. And the high priest brings forth the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony, which would have been the book of the law of Moses. And they made him king, and anointed him, and they clapped their hands, and said, God save the king. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people and to the temple of the Lord. And when she looked, behold, the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, and the princes and the trumpeters by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew with trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, Treason, treason. Matthew Henry said, Athaliah hastened her own destruction. She herself was the greatest traitor, and yet was first and loudest in crying, Treason, treason. The most guilty are commonly the most forward to reproach others. But Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of the hundreds, the officers of the host, and said unto them, Have her forth without the ranges, and him that followeth her kill with the sword. For the priest had said, Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. What he's meaning right here is have her forth without the ranges. He's meaning take her outside of the temple and do it with one on one side and one on another guard. And they laid hands on her, and she went by the way by the which the horses came into the king's house, and there was she slain. Imagine that. Just within a few years, hell has received, in this time period, they received Jezebel, the most wicked woman in the world, and then the only other woman that I can think of, besides some of my exes, that was just as evil as Jezebel. And so hell is just eating up, you know. But notice right here where they killed her. And she went by the way by the which the horses came into the king's house. This would have been just right outside of where they were. Somewhere in this area did they kill her. And Jehoiada, the priest, made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal and brake it down. His altars and his images brake they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars, and the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. And while we're on this topic of this temple that she had built, it's worth noting what it says in the book of Chronicles about her and her sons. For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken up the house of God, meaning broken into Solomon's temple one year, and also all the dedicated things of the house of the Lord did they bestow upon Balaam. You imagine the anger of the Lord at that? Now referring to this priest of Baal that was executed after this, Cambridge said this: "We read of no other priest of Baal in Judah, and so we may conclude that though the court favored idolatry, it found no great favor with the rest of the kingdom. Otherwise, we should have heard of an array of priests like that of Jezebel in Samaria." And so Jehoiada, the high priest, he took the rulers over hundreds and the captains and the guards and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet, and they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. Anytime that the scripture reiterates something like that it's already plainly said, it's emphasizing she died that day. They made sure to kill this evil woman. 7 years old was Joash when he began to reign. Now on to chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. So we're told right there, right off the bat, before we're given any more details about his reign, how Jehoash, this young child, he reigns for 40 years, the same amount of time that David and Solomon reigned, but his life is cut drastically short. He only lives to 47 years old. That's pretty young to die. Oh, and do believe there's plenty reason why his life is cut that short. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. So long as the priest was alive and instructing him, he did perfect before the Lord. But we'll read right here in a second about how when Jehoiada is not in the picture, what happens. Matthew Henry said this about Jehoiada watching over and guiding this young king. "It is a great mercy to young people, especially to all young men of rank, like kings and such, like Jehoash, to have those about them who will instruct them to do what is right in the sight of the Lord. And they do wisely and well for themselves when willing to be counseled and ruled." But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. Many kings did this. Even good godly kings left these high places alone. And in case you don't know, the high places were other places of old that they used to worship God at, even the true God. The people of Judah did. And they continue using it, but God says only go to Solomon's temple. Stop using those high places. Because they've been tainted by pagan worship. Cambridge says about this: "Worship having been permitted there on these high places before the temple was erected, it was difficult to draw the people away from them. as they would be nearer at hand than the one place set apart for sacrifice. Talking about Solomon's temple. And Joash said to the priest, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passeth the account, the money that every man is set at, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priest take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. It's believed that Joash actually gives this command in his 20th year. He gives this command at that, but he lets it go on for 3 years. What he's wanting to do is he's wanting to repair Solomon's temple. It's been up now for well over a century, and he's wanting to repair it. It's probably looking a little worn. So he gives this command unto the priest to collect money in order for it to be repaired. Josephus said, the priests and Levites were sent through the whole land to ask half a shekel from each person for the furniture and restoration of the temple, which had been broken up by Joram and Athaliah and her sons. But it was so that in the 23rd year, the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priest had not repaired the breaches of the house. Then King Joash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests, and said unto them, why repair ye not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. And the priest consented to receive no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. So the priests completely withdraw from any matter in order to repair Solomon's temple. But Jehoiada the priest took a chest, and bored a hole in the lid of it, and set it beside the altar on the right side, as one cometh into the house of the Lord. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. You may be thinking that Jehoiada, because what they're wanting to do is whenever people come in now, instead of going to people's houses and asking for the money, now whenever people come to worship at the temple, they can just give however much that they want for the rebuilding of it. And it says that Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole. He did most certainly do that, but he did it at the king's command. We learn about that in the book of Chronicles. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. So they're getting a lot of money for reparations. And they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of the Lord. They didn't give it to the priest, they gave it to the overseers, and the overseers laid it out for the carpenters and the builders and all this, and to masons and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Howbeit there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. We learn how these are actually made just shortly after they're done with all the other work. But they gave that to the workmen, and repaired therewith the house of the Lord. Moreover, they reckoned not with the men, into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully, meaning that they didn't really check up on any kind of thievery of the money or anything. These men actually had a fervent heart to do good unto the Lord and to the king and to the people. These were very good, faithful workers. Pulpit commentary actually said this: society rests upon faith and trust. In all business transactions, confidence must be reposed in someone whose character is the guarantee of his honesty. That goes with relationships, marriage, business, everything, all things, even going to heaven, faith, trust in Jesus. These are crucial to humanity, to our souls even, to eternity. The trespass money and sin money was not brought into the house of the Lord. It was the priest. So they didn't neglect the priest. They still gave it their due. Then Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it, and Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem. Hazael, once again, as we've talked about, he's that warrior king of Syria. And he's come down to Gath in the Philistine land, and right over here is Jerusalem. And Hazael is wanting to come and take the city. And Jehoash, king of Judah, took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord and in the king's house, and sent it to Hazael, king of Syria, and he went away from Jerusalem. So he does all this for the house of the Lord and everything, and then he winds up just giving it all to Hazael in order to get. And he's not the first godly king to do this, or at least he's godly in the beginning. But he's not the first to do this. Asa, his ancestor, did this, as well as Hezekiah. A lot of men had done this due to fear. This should be a great lesson for us Christians, not to give in to fear. But Albert Barnes, he did make a good point about this, because we don't read about it in Kings. We read more about this in Chronicles. Jehoash did not submit without a struggle. See the details in Chronicles. It was not until his army was defeated that he followed the example of his ancestor Asa and bought the friendship of the Syrians with the temple treasures. And the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? Now, if you're only reading this chapter and then you're reading all the way up until this next verse will throw you off. You're like, what in the world has went on? And Joash's servants arose and made a conspiracy and slew Joash in the house of Millo, which goeth down to Silla. 2 Chronicles says this. And when they were departed from him, speaking of the Syrians, because even though Hazael backs away from them at that time, Syria comes back in near the end of Joash's reign, and they come back to fight him. But once that they leave, they left him in great diseases. His own servants conspired against him for the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest. What? So Joash was brought up and learned everything that he knew from Jehoiada the priest, and then he winds up killing his sons. Not only that, but he winds up killing the prophet Zechariah. Zechariah actually stands up to him and prophesies against all that he's doing, because he's starting to worship Baal, and he's going mad by this time. But you don't learn that in Kings. You can only learn that. But and slew him on his bed, and he died, and they buried him in the city of David, but they buried him not in the sepulchres of the kings. He was dishonored, even in burial. That's how wicked he had become. I believe that Albert Barnes sums it up best, what I'm trying to say. This conspiracy was connected with religion. They killed him over religion. Soon after the death of Jehoiada, the priest, Joash had apostatized, had renewed the worship of Baal, and, despite of many prophetic warnings, had persisted in his evil courses, even commanding Zechariah to be slain when he rebuked them. And it even names his assassins. For Jozachar, the son of Shemaeth, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servants smote him, and he died, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his stead. So talk about a fall from doing something good for the Lord, I'll say. He totally turns, but he's quickly killed upon doing that. But Adam Clarke says something best right here. Oh, how few of the few who begin to live to God continue unto the end. We should make perfect note of this. This is something to learn from. And with Jehu and so many others that began well, but they wind up horrible in the end. Even worshiping false gods like Solomon. Now we see Joash doing this. The most promising people that you would think of the Lord, I don't know what happens to them. I don't know. But we should take very good lessons from this. I don't know if it's depression, family problems, what's happening, midlife crisis, but something happens to these men and women that turns them, into the bad way at the end of their life, and God takes them out. Happens every time. This should make us fear the Lord, but that is the study for today. And I hope that you all learned something. That's a good lesson to leave off with. Until next week, we will be picking up in chapter 13. God of peace be with you. Amen.